So before we get into it, we really need to discuss what Fundies really is. Fundies is kind of a generic term that gets thrown around a lot. A lot of people will say, oh, well, my character is Fundies and your character, he's just a cheeser, right? But what do they really mean whenever they say something like that? Usually when people are saying that a character is Fundies, or a character or a player has strong fundamentals, usually what they're talking about is a character who plays really well around the universal mechanics of the game. If we want to look at more of a textbook definition though, we can go ahead and look it up on the Fighting Game Glossary, which is a universal resource that you can use to look up any fighting game terms. Fundamentals, also known as Fundies, a collection of basic skills that will help you win in virtually every fighting game. These include the ability to keep a good range, play footsies, anti-air when the opponent jumps, react to moves with high startup, and condition the opponent to panic before you. Good fundamentals are the bedrock of a solid player, and once you have enough practice, you can transfer these skills in between games, even if the systems are very different. With that out of the way, we kind of have a underlying idea of what fundamentals really are. In Smash, some good fundamental skills would be stuff like shield pressure, whip punishing, spacing, anti-airs, approaching and then stuffing them out, landing, juggling, ledge trapping, zoning, etc., etc. A lot of things that are just baked into the core of the game. One big thing is that I want to say that fundamental gameplay can look very, very different depending on what character you choose. I think there is good examples in Fox. Fox is often touted as being a very fundamentally solid character. He's able to kind of put on strong pressure up close because of his speed and his frame data, and condition people in a way that forces them into committal habits, right? And he uses his other mechanics like his lasers to kind of condition the opponent into approaching and engaging with him. Samus is also a character that I would say is often considered very fundamentally solid. She uses her kit in a way to condition certain habits in the same way that Fox does, but from a distance. She does it through zoning patterns, and then she capitalizes on what the opponent's doing and how they would be handling her projectiles through grabbing them shielding or anti-airing their jumps and so on and so forth. Both characters, Samus and Fox, I would say, utilize a very strong fundamental game plan to condition their opponent, as well as capitalize on bad habits. Every action that these characters choose forces some sort of response from their opponent in a way that encourages interaction with the core game mechanics. Every time Samus shoots a missile, you either have to jump over it, which can lead to you getting anti-aired, or you have to shield it, which can lead to you getting grabbed out of shield. So we've already kind of taken a look at characters that are considered Fundies characters, but let's look at a few characters that are often considered not Fundies characters. You're probably already thinking it, but yeah, it's Steve. Steve and Kazuya are often considered some of the least fundamental characters in the entire game. It's because their game plan and win condition discourages interaction between at least one or both of the players, right? So when you get into a match and you're fighting Steve, what does Steve really want to do? Well, he really wants to mine for his resources, right? His wooden tools are obviously much weaker than his diamond tools, so he wants to get as strong as possible, and that encourages him to kind of put these blocks down and try to be as safe as possible until he gets his resources. And even once he does end up getting diamond, he still doesn't really want to engage with you because he has relatively poor movement speed and he has like a really low jump. So he has like weaknesses that makes it so that he doesn't really want to approach anyone on their terms or interact with them in a way that is like fundamental to the game. Instead, even when he does have his diamond resources, you'll see him throw out minecart to try to like goad you into picking something like risky to try to like catch him. But this is like relatively safe, obviously, right? Or like, you know, he'll put up more blocks to see like, he'll put up some more blocks to kind of like bait you into trying to break the blocks, and then he'll whip punish you with say like dash attack or dash grab or something like that. Or minecart even, because that's also a burst option and it beats shields, right? So Steve, in this sense, his win condition essentially discourages interaction between both players. Obviously, the other player wants to get in as much as possible, but Steve's not going to let that happen if he's like playing to his win condition. Let's go over Kazuya. So some of you may know that Kazuya has quite a bit of moves that give him invincibility. You see that blue? So you see how all of that's blue? This is just a general movement option that he has. All of that is invincibility, right? And you can see he stays invincible for quite some time. And it's not just this dash that he has, it's also his primary combo starter. As you can see, that wasn't even the perfect one, right? But he has so much invincibility both on his arm and his entire upper body in the beginning. If he happens to hit you with this move, chances are you're gonna die because of it. And he can combo it out of grab as well. I'm no Kazuya player, but you get the idea. So how do you avoid this? How do you avoid someone invincibly dashing at you over and over again until they land their invincible combo starter? So the answer actually is you platform camp him. When he's down here, obviously he can't hit you with his combo starter, and he kind of has a hard time hitting people on platforms above him in general. Like this is his up tilt, that's not gonna hit. The only thing that kind of hits is up smash, and that's like relatively like thin. It's not like a lot of other up smashes in the game that will just like cover the entire platform. And then on top of that, obviously his short hop's not getting up there. Pretty much every character in the game's short hop isn't getting up there. But even his full hop, as you can see, doesn't really reach this top platform. Obviously he can double jump, but you in Smash, you probably know you don't want to be using your double jump all willy-nilly, right? So as you can see, the answer to kind of beat out Kazuya most of the time is to just kind of like platform camp him, because if you try to fight with him, he'll land his invincible combo starter and then he'll just like kill you off. And in the same way that Steve, his win condition is to not play the game with you, when you fight Kazuya, your win condition is to not play the game with Kazuya. So both of these characters, I would say, are considered pretty non-fundamental characters because the win condition for one or both of the players is to just not interact with them. And I think that is a pretty good indicator of what makes a character not a very fundamental character. But what I will say is that even though these characters are very often not considered fundamental characters, there is still a bit of a fundamental game plan in how they play. Even though like Steve doesn't want to interact with you, he still does have some fundamentals of a traditional zoner, because he still wants to play this keep away game from you. He still wants to put options out that kind of force you into bad situations that he can take advantage of. So at the end of the day, there are fundamental aspects of these characters. However, the general win condition for one or more of the players that are in a match with one of these characters would encourage you to not engage with the core mechanics of the game. Hence, they're considered not fundamental characters. Let's dive into that concept just a little bit more. What makes a character more Fundies than another? Like, we already touched on how interaction is a big part of it, but outside of characters like Steve or Kazuya, characters who legitimately just break the conventions of the game, what makes Fox more of a fundamental character than Bowser? What I would argue makes Fox more of a fundamental character than, say, Bowser is how meaningfully they encourage interactions at all ranges. Fox is obviously pretty scary at burst range, right? You don't want Fox to be basically anywhere near where he can do a dash attack or a dash grab, right? Because then you're playing like Fox's guessing game. That's a given. He's a very fast character. He wants to be close range, so there's no arguing that he's scary close range. But even from the full screen length away, you obviously don't want him to just get lasers off on you for free, because damage will just slowly start racking up higher and higher. So because of that, you're kind of encouraged to play closer to Fox and not exactly from full screen, even though he kind of wants to be closer to you. So that encourages interaction with Fox. It encourages you to play the game with Fox. If we go back and look at Bowser, on the other hand, you can see that, like, in a very similar way, you don't want Bowser to be close to you because then he gets access to all of his most threatening stuff. But the difference is, if you're full screen from Bowser, he's not really going to be able to threaten you. The best thing that he can do is try to jump at you and do Flame Breath, right? Aside from that, Bowser doesn't really have any options that inherently makes you want to approach him. He just doesn't have anything like a Fox laser from full screen to really encourage you to approach Bowser. So you can pretty much always play at a safe distance away from the character, whereas you can't really always do that against Fox. So In summary, Fox always has a tool to make you feel like you're making a mistake, whereas you can pretty comfortably play Keep Away from Bowser at least until you run out of stage, right? With all this in mind, the main reason I bring this up is because I think that there's a character that often gets misunderstood as a filthy cheeser that has no fundamental game plan whatsoever. He's just a cheese lord. When in reality, I believe that he's one of the most fundamental characters in the game. And that character is... It's Donkey Kong. Alright, I'll be the first to admit that I'm probably a little bit biased, but I'll need you guys to hear me out. And I mean like, actually hear me out. Donkey Kong is always encouraging the opponent to play the game with him in some meaningful way, and he does so through a pure fundamental game plan. Before we dive super into it, we need to go over what DK's base game plan is. Basically, what Donkey Kong wants to do is he wants to box you out with his big old long arms that are all disjointed and safe, and then once you start shielding, once you start trying to dash up to him and start shielding, he runs in and he grabs you for some pretty impressive damage. Okay, so that's great and all for mid-range, but every character can condition you to shield and then grab at mid-range, so what's the big deal with Donkey Kong? Well, for one, I'd make the argument that the size of punish that Donkey Kong gets off of grab makes this interaction a lot more meaningful than, say, Lucina grabbing you for the same thing. But also, the difference is that even though mid-range is the area where DK's core game plan takes place, he's effectively able to put pressure on at all ranges. If you're familiar with his frame data, you may think that Donkey Kong's close range is really not that good. I mean, sure, he has grab, but the rest of his frame data is pretty slow and unsafe. Allow me to introduce you guys to Donkey Kong's two favorite moves, Dash Attack and Aerial Down Special. Not only does Dash Attack cover a ton of the stage, like, that was over a third of the stage right there, it also leads to some insane combos like back air or grab. But Dash Attack is also safe on block. That was -5. For the record, -6 is roughly what's considered safe in this game, but you can get it to go even lower. -1. Donkey Kong Dash Attack is a lot safer than you would think. And the fact that it starts combos that go into grab or back air is just insane. It makes Donkey Kong's close and burst range all the more terrifying. Aerial Hand Slap is also notoriously safe, active, and leads into amazing combos. There we go, -3, as you can see. You put these two moves together and it gives Donkey Kong a super threatening way to get in and start putting on the pressure. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, aha, RPS, you said Kazuya wasn't Fundies because he discouraged interaction. If I just say platform camp DK, I avoid dash attack and grab. Aerial hand slap is frame 19, so I can just stuff the startup if he tries to go for that. Clearly, DK can't be Fundies because I can just shut down his best options through platform camping. Therefore, I am encouraged to not play the game with him. It might be true that you can avoid his insane grab game by platform camping, sure, but Donkey Kong has some of the most insane juggling and vertical buttons in the game, and that's thanks to his up air being fast and his head being fully invincible during the move. I should mention that not even Cloud down air can challenge this move from below. Not to mention his up tilt or up smash covering pretty much the entirety of most all platforms, and the ability to mix up people shielding on platforms with the potential shield break from his aerial side special. It makes it pretty risky to just try to platform camp Donkey Kong. Okay, so he's threatening at mid-range and he's threatening at close range, and I can't platform camp him, but big whoop. If you watch my video on character archetypes, which you totally should by the way, you could have already told me that he's a rushdown boxer. Of course he's good at mid and close range. The real elephant in the room is his long range. Donkey Kong doesn't have a projectile or anything like that, so what's stopping me from running away from him and just whiff punishing all of his overextensions? And better yet, if I have a zoning tool, what's stopping me from just shooting him to death? It's Giant Punch. It's just Giant Punch. While Donkey Kong charging Giant Punch doesn't really seem like it's actively threatening in the way that you see your percent racking up for not approaching him, letting DK just charge Punch is actually a death sentence. So Giant Punch by itself does 35. It also kills at like 55. It straight up has 12 frames of super armor, 6 in the air by the way, and is safe on block with automatic spacing that is advantageous for Donkey Kong. Every moment you choose not to approach Donkey Kong, you're giving him more access to what is effectively one of the most broken moves in the game. Realistically, the only way to not get blown up by this move is by avoiding it entirely, which is a lot easier said than done when it has super armor. Okay, so let's get some things straight. Donkey Kong's close range is scary, his mid-range boxing is oppressive, and you can't even camp him because if you do, he gets free reign to a broken move that he can just throw out safely and start charging again. The way I'm framing Donkey Kong makes him sound broken. If you aren't familiar with Ultimate, you might even think that he's high tier, or maybe even top, since he sounds like he's scary no matter what range you're at. But if you look at the tier list, he's just kinda okay. If you go back a season or two, people actually thought he was ass for quite a while. So what gives? What makes him so ass? How are you supposed to be the character that's scary regardless of what range he is relative to you? Well, when you play a very fundamental game plan, you're often susceptible to very fundamental weaknesses. Sure, Donkey Kong can whiff punish with dash attacks, spaces tilts, and pressure approaches with charge punch, but that doesn't mean he's not susceptible to all the same fundamental game plans. Donkey Kong's boxing tools have quite a lot of whiff to capitalize on. His lackluster out of shield game leaves him in a bad spot against close range pressure, and his large hurt box makes it difficult for him to navigate around zoning. Of course, his susceptibility to whiff punishes, burst options, and zoning aren't the only weaknesses that keep him lower on the tier list. His lacking of close range defensive options and big hurt box also make it much more likely that he's punished a lot harder for mistakes than the other characters. Now, I know that the public opinion of DK is that he's just a shield-grabbing cheeser, but with all that we know now, let's take a look back at what the textbook definition of fundamentals are, and then let's recap with Donkey Kong's kit. A collection of basic skills that will help you win virtually every fighting game. These include the ability to keep a good range, which we already covered is Donkey Kong's tilts. Play footsies, once again, he can do that with tilts. Anti-air when the opponent jumps. His head's invincible, of course he can do that. React to moves with high startup. He has dash attack, which is a strong burst option that leads into his best combos. And condition the opponent to panic before you. He does that with charge punch. So, by looking at the textbook definition of fundamentals, we can very easily see that Donkey Kong kind of hits all the checks. So, in summary, it's my belief that the way that you win against DK and the way that you lose against DK both require both characters and players to interact with the core mechanics of the game makes him one of the most fundamental characters in the game. But do you guys disagree? If so, let me know in the comments down below and give me your takes on what you guys think is the most fundamental characters in the game. But yeah, that's all I got for now. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.